Коллеги, добрый день.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm glad to welcome you all here. I hope you are comfortable, although it's a little bit crowdy here. Still, the atmosphere is quite friendly. I am Valentin Timakov, CEO of Agency for Human Resources Development in the Far East, and I'll be the moderator of our roundtable today. The topic is Human Resources for the New Economy, Southeast Vector. We're going to discuss a number of topical issues determining the economic development of our country for the coming decades, creating favorable conditions for internal migration of the population from the older regions to the newly developing ones, and the problems of creating the HR reserves for such territories. And we'll be speaking about the Far East and the North Caucasian territory. I want to present the experts of our roundtable to Lev Kuznetsov, Minister of the Russian Federation for North Caucasus, Kachayev Sergei Valerievich, Deputy Minister of the Russian Federation for the Development of the Far East, Mikhail Kirsanov, Director of the Employment Department of the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Alexander Klimov, Deputy Minister of Education and Science, Alan Aboev, Deputy Head of the Government of the Republic of North Ossetia and Alania, Mr. Arlovsky, and Robert Ulanov, Director General of World Skills Russia, and a number of experts from the employer companies such as Sibur, Gazprom, Polizolota, and some other entities. Dear colleagues, as there'll be quite a number of speakers and a lot of issues to be discussed, to propose the following. We planned the contributions of the participants of the roundtable for presentations, and there are experts in the hall. We expect that they all will give some additional details and provide answers to the questions that may arise in the audience. And we propose that the questions and answers should be asked and provided in a specified period of time towards the end. Mr. Kuznetsov, Minister for North Caucasus, will take the first word and tell us about the problems of this region. Thank you. Dear colleagues, when we initiated this roundtable together with the Ministry for the Far East, we thought that on the example of our two regions, we might discuss the possibilities of solving local problems and finding tools that could be acceptable for wider strata in view of the social, economic, and other challenges in the country. And I hope that in our discussion we'll pay attention to the Caucasus and the Far East, but will not localize our proposals to these two territories exclusively. And these two ministries surely were set with a special purpose to solve specific problems of the regions. But according to the statistics in the recent years in the Russian Federation, demographic situation has become quite favorable from the viewpoint of the ratio between birth rate and mortality and external migration. But if we look deeper into it, we'll see that the birth rate dominates in North Caucasus, and it's positive, really positive there. But there are other constituent territories where this indicator is not good enough. If we take migration, in the past 2 years, we've seen a burst of it because of the external political and economic events which favored an inflow of specialists to our country. At the same time, we see that with account of the economic crisis, the Committee on the Anti-Crisis Measure specified that there's a number of excessive unemployment in some constituent territories. In North Caucasus, this is really so, and if we add it up with the demographic process, we'll understand that even with external support and specified state policy for the development of the economy of the region will not be able to create as many jobs as we need compared to the number of people who look for employment today and are registered as unemployed, and the number of people who are coming annually to our territory. 4.5 thousand able-bodied people are registered, and 450,000 is the figure that is obtained using international methodology, and that's the figure for people who are not employed. And we see that the trends are not favorable. In the Far East, we also see a negative policy of development, but there's negative migration. And the problem is, the problem we face in the Caucasus is how to employ people, and in the Far East, how to find really skilled human resources and to attract specialists who get unemployed in other territories in the crisis situation or through reforms. The Ministry of Education is present here too, and that's really important because we'd like to see a model when regions with excessive or deficit employment should see some reforms, restructuring the educational processes with account of the real needs and traditions of those regions. If we take Northern Caucasus and the Far East, we may say that North Caucasus might be a donor from the point of view of providing HR resources to the Far East. Historically, many projects in the Far East, in the north, in Norilsk, were implemented inter alia thanks to specialists from Northern Caucasus. I give the example of Norilsk in the city of Talnak. The Ossetians account for the majority of population. This is a miners town, and the North Ossetian Metallurgical University was the producer of HR resources for that industry. And there are other examples too. So happily, we have educational traditions, we preserved them, and we'd like to discuss the possibility of using those traditions and that experience of schooling in the modern day situation. Now we have a federal university, that's the top of the iceberg, and the top which is on the whole structure of school, college, secondary and higher educational institutions, and we may help other regions with highly skilled personnel for the needs of the industry everywhere. We spend money on attracting compatriots, inviting them from abroad and offer jobs to them in some cases, instead of providing those jobs to other people who are unemployed in other territories within the country. Highly skilled specialists from other regions, when they come previously, were treated with a certain attitude, but now the situation has changed and there are new challenges, and the situation should be changed with account of traditions, needs, ethnic and cultural interrelations. And within that segment, all those problems should be taken into account to find effective solutions. The problem is not only in how people will learn to live together, but how young people get on together. And the centers of attraction, the central regions, are the places where they pay more, but at the same time, it's much more interesting to live there. The young people choose the place for their work and life, where the healthcare, education, the cultural and sports life is enriched compared with other territories. And I'm glad that business representatives are in the audience too. Previously, business people were sure they could buy any specialists in the market, but now they come to the realization that they have to be the key actor in this ground, because people have the choice and they you will not be able to get the best staff when they need those specialists. And so I'd like to see here some proposals made as to the challenges and possible tools of answering the issues of today. Thank you. According to statistics in Northern Caucasus, many inhabitants prefer to move to the central part or southern parts of Russia, and out of 4 million of economically active population, more than 400 people are unemployed. There are a number of employment programs, including those targeted at development of resort areas, but not all of them are attractive for the young people or prestigious for them. And the young people look for employment in other regions, not where they live. Lev Vladimirovich, what are the key factors to be taken into consideration, plus to the wages, to enhance the motivation of people to come to the Far East, for example? That's a good question. We should ask the young people first, but I'll try to answer that. Partially I did already. I think that creating conditions related to the social and cultural environment is really relevant. When a young specialist is offered a job, he or she should be sure that there'll be interesting life beyond the job place. And surely the natural integration into the traditions and customs of life in those regions should be tracked, and the regions on their part should also be ready to welcome the coming people with their traditions and their customs, and learn to live with that. And surely the key point is the prestige of the profession. The emotional segment is very relevant for the young people, and we should revive the respectability of some professions, doctors, teachers, engineers, technicians, specialists with secondary vocational education. For vocational, this emotional pride for the profession is very relevant. Thank you. I want to give the floor to Sergei Kachaev, Deputy Minister for the Far East, and I hope he'll tell us about possibilities of attracting human resources to the Far East. Thank you for the possibility to address this audience. First, I would like to thank Lev Vladimirovich for the organization of this round table and for the invitation of the Ministry for the forest development to come. Thus, is really symbolic that we hold this event now, dedicated to the priorities of the territorial ministries, the Ministry for the Northern Caucasus and for the forest. The main priority for us is people. When the new team came to the Forest Development Ministry 2.5 years ago, we determined 4 major tasks for our work. First, creating the territory of advanced development, and especially in localized zones and territories where the best conditions for business would be created, not only in the forest or in Russia, but generally in the Asian Pacific region. Second, support of big-size investment projects in the forest that could change the economy of the forest. Third, the third task was privatization of state and public programs with state participation targeted at the highest or most topical demands of development in the forest. And the fourth dimension was development of the human resources. In the 2.5 years that have passed, out of those 4 priorities, we've developed a greater number, but the development of the human capital is in the first 3 or 4 top priority dimensions of our work. When the Ministry for North Caucasus proposed to us this format of a roundtable, we were glad to join in and participate because we do have some proposals, and we may share some experience with our colleagues, and we have proposals for the regions of Northern Caucasus and proposals for business, higher educational institutions in the forest and in Northern Caucasus. And now, an overview of the major problems, and then during the discussions I'll give additional details, if needed, about what we are doing and what the results are. In the forest, few people live, 6,200,000 population, and in the recent time, there has been positive natural growth of the population, but because of migration, the population of the forest is diminishing steadily, and this has its effect on the labor market. The investment projects that have been launched in the forest and that are promoted there, the projects targeted for the future involving participation of foreign capital, are included in the advanced development territories, the projects, the free port of Vladivostok. They enjoy preferential regimes or treatment, and they create a huge demand for human resources on the market. Up to 2020, we'll need about 50,000 specialists to work in those projects, and with the count of the family members, that will be more than 100,000 people. And these are the projects that are being launched now. In the coming 5 years, the labor market in the forest will change dramatically, and we need to get ready for that. Our actions are numerous. We created the Agency for Human Resources Development in the Forest. Vladimir Vitalyevich is Director General or CEO of this institute, and he'll tell us about the work of this institute or agency and its programs. The labor mobility program has been developed, and we thank the Labor Ministry for this program. 5 regions of the forest are included in this program and participating in it. The Labor Ministry, realizing all the specificities of the forest, tries to help us, and we hope that this program will be expanded in the forest, including the advanced development territories. The forest regions have their specific regions. There are specific needs of the investors there, and at the regional level, employment services are being modernized. This process is underway in the forest now, and this is a system that will make it possible to welcome people and give them employment. But together with the Ministry for Northern Caucasus, we need to establish the so-called direct supplies of highly skilled personnel to specific industrial enterprises and entities in the forest for specific investment projects. We do have such a possibility now. The Human Resources Development Agency in the forest is one of our windows for the organization of such interaction with the ministry and the regions in Northern Caucasus. I think that the year 2015, as the year when we finalized the formation of this infrastructure, will be a landmark in attracting human resources to the forest, and 2016 will be the first year of implementing specific projects of attracting people to the forest. I would also like to say that we hope to see an active involvement in this process on the part of the higher educational institutions. We have 2 federal universities in the forest, the Northeast Federal University and the Forest University in Vladivostok, and we need to establish interaction between them, exchange of students, training and retraining courses for the faculties, and this will make it possible for us to make the educational system more adjusted to the real demands in the forest. And I hope that our roundtable will be the first practical step in that direction. Thank you very much for your attention. All the questions will be asked after all the presentations are made, but possibly somebody wants to ask something specific. Vladimir Putin said that the economic development of the forest is a national priority. You emphasized the interest of Russian and foreign investors in such industrial development in the forest. At the same time, there are numerous questions that future employees have. These are questions related to the social infrastructure, transport, roads, automobile roads, and what are the plans of the forest development ministries in that sphere? Thank you. Our work in this direction is structured along a number of directions. First, as I already said, we have the authority to make a priority of specific federal and local programs which are most relevant for this sphere of development and for promoting specialized activities in the forest. We use that scope of authorities, and the North Caucasian Ministry has similar authorities too. We move in the same direction. We make a priority of those federal programs, and the investment programs of companies with state participation are also viewed as priorities in the forest. We have the authority to do so, and we make good use of them. Our goal in all the social programs is to include those aspects in our plans of work and determine the financing for those programs for the territory of the forest, and then together with the sectoral ministries and the regions, we're going to build that infrastructure. This is one of the dimensions of our work which is being promoted actively, and we view this as a major goal. A couple of years ago, there was inadequate financing of the forest per capita, and in case of some programs, this was dozens of times less than the average for Russia. And we need to change that and to solve this problem. As for our own possibilities as the ministry, in the framework of the program I cited, we have the possibility of subsidizing the investors for creating the infrastructure for specific investment projects. We actively use this tool now. We have about 12 major investment projects underway in our pool, and we are developing, with the help of the federal subsidies, the infrastructure for those projects, solving the local problems of our investors. These are the two major lines of development of the infrastructure in the forest. And I'm speaking about our activities, but similar things are done at the regional levels. Regions determine the priorities for channeling their resources, although the resources are limited, and they work in coordination with us, and the synergy is the outcome. Attracting human resources to the forest is a major task of the Agency for Human Resources Development in the Forest. I would like to present more detailed information about it and tell you about the tasks that the agency is facing and the solutions that we've worked out. The previous speakers already mentioned that the key goal of successful development in the forest is attracting specialists, especially young, able-bodied, and full of energy people. In a short period of time, we need to create a social structure and comfortable conditions to attract people, to make them wish to come and stay there for long. Surely that means providing a good job, well-paid job, interesting labor conditions, and an interesting life beyond it, beyond your work. For many years, the demographic situation on the forest has been characterized as a very complicated ones. The density of the population is 8 times below the average for Russia, and the migration outflow is about 20,000 people. The Far East just overcame the after effects of the huge flood that took place recently, and we've accumulated some experience in fighting such natural catastrophes, but that is a good experience, and on the basis of it, we may hope that we'll be able to cope with other tasks in future. We should also mention that the level of wages compared to the cost of living in the Far East has changed. Surely the assets left after you pay for your living and for the household necessities and for the subsistence of the family is lower than the average for Russia. And we surely promote living houses, construction programs, but not adequately yet. The healthcare problems are key and topical for our territory.
If each and every of those questions remain to be very acute for us, so that's why I suggest that we discuss it with the experts from this round table. We talk about the investments attracted to the Far East, and you know that before until 2025, in order to implement all the projects, we need to have about 600,000 more experts employed in the new projects, and we will have about 180,000 new jobs as the result of the free port Vladivostok. And to illustrate that, I would like to show you some numbers, and you'll see what kind of projects we already manage at the point. For example, Sibur and Gazprom companies have the city of Svobodny in Amur region. They want to employ 20,000 more people, while currently the current population of Svobodny city is only 130,000 people. So you see what kind of a stressful factor that would be, because these people should live somewhere, they should be housed, they should have some social life, and 40 kilometers away from Svobodny will be a Vostochny space craft platform, and therefore we need to develop this region further. And we know that 7,500 people or staff more are required for in vessel building industry in that region. We know that most of these people will have to come from abroad, because we don't have currently people trained in those professions. Kamchatka Gold Project will need titanic new labor resources to meet its requirements and to be able to deliver what they need to deliver. And Rusagro, which is a big corporation in the Far East, they need to employ 6,000 more people to support those projects that they have for the near future. The agency currently is the organization to ensure that the government plans are implemented. And that's how our targets look in terms of the human resources needs for the near future in the Far East. This year we started a labor mobility program. We believe it's one of the most efficient programs that would allow the employers to bring people from the labor surplus regions. They will be able to get those people trained, place them in jobs, and ensure that they will continue their careers. We need to bring 200,000 plus people using the labor mobility program. We want to expand it to the other Far East constituents of the Russian Federation, and we hope that there will be a new program developed for attracting people from the Northern Caucasus and some other labor surplus regions. In 2016, most of our investors will start working in the field, and we believe that about 20,000 people will be employed in 2016 only in the construction industry for civil projects in the Far East. And we believe that 5,000 more people will come in the agro-business, including the self-employment people and people who will support the new smaller and medium-sized businesses. We think that there should be some new resources to help them adapt and they get accustomed to the new areas. We need more mortgage programs to help them resolve their housing issues. Our agency was set up fairly recently, and I mean not so long ago, and we received already many requests, well, to get grants to help people move from the, let's say, northwestern region or from some central Russian region to move to the Far East. And we think that about 2,000 people, that is the job seekers and their family members, will move to the Far East only through this vehicle, through their own applications. Many people are moved to the southern Sakhalin. You know, South Sakhalin is the area where even fruit orchards can be maintained, and the living conditions are quite comfortable. And we are going to issue the statistical data on the attractiveness of the regions. In 2017 and 2018, we will go through some stressful years. You know, 2016 is going to be what we call a demographic void, when the number of people who graduate from schools and enter the universities will be the smallest in the recent years, while we would still need more than 100,000 plus new vacancies to be filled in the Far East. And certainly we will have to maybe to review those numbers given the very low numbers in terms of how many people of young age we're going to have at that point, school graduates. And our professional training institutions will train people mostly in the power sector and transport. Tourism is going to develop quite vividly in the Far East. The civil construction and fishing industries are given priority, and we see that it's very hard to find people in aquaculture. And again, it's fishing industry, and we'll have to find them elsewhere, not in Russia, maybe. And another issue which remains to be quite pressing, and we've already experienced, we have this imbalance of labor resources. One unemployed may be offered 3 various vacancies in the Far East, and it seems to be a good thing, but actually those vacancies cannot be filled because we are short of those particular professions and technical specialties. If we fail to agree with our universities, with the higher education sector, that what kind of professions should be developed in Russia, or what kind of people should be brought from other regions, we would fail to address this issue properly. We have analyzed 5 sectors, and we developed an electronic bulletin for the jobs that are most wanted and what kind of professions are in the higher demand in the Russian economy. We reviewed several investment projects, and now we are quite sure in what kind of professions will be in the highest demand in the Far East in the nearest decades. And this reference book was already released, and the author is already here. We have 190 specialists now identified that will be in high demand in the Far East. We know that this growing economy will really demand those people. We know that we have a confirmation from our review of the investment projects that about 78,000 new jobs will open in the near 2 to 3 years. We will have to request the universities in the Northern Caucasus, in some other federal districts, to start training people who will be meant to move to the Far East eventually. We also hope that our electronic reference book will be very useful for our higher schools, for universities, because then those universities will know what kind of experts will be in high demand in the near future. And we think that the government may use this reference book to identify some of the statistics that they will be based upon in the estimates for the economic forecast. We thought that we are short of people in recreational and tourism industries, but then when we reviewed those numbers already, because we know that some vacancies have been filled in the gaming zones, and we still, so we're going to update some numbers, and we are planning to update the reference book regularly. We have some estimates for the salary levels so that the university graduates may expect to get in the Far East. We think it would help both the parents of the current school children and the graduates themselves where they need to go. The salary levels and trends in that area demonstrate that they grow at a higher rate than the growth rate elsewhere in the Russian Federation. And because, well, there are some, since the employers have some tax preferences and benefits and social fund benefits that they may save upon, and that helps them pay higher salary levels than elsewhere in the Russian Federation. So as far as we were going to find people to be employed in the Far East, it's an issue that we are very seriously looking into. Certainly we look into the population of the Far East. First and foremost, we want the Far Eastern labor force to become more competitive in the labor market. We want them be retrained in some new professions. The next source that we are looking at is the monocompany towns and closed cities and the labor surplus regions, especially in the Northern Caucasus, that we see as potential participants of our programs. But we hope that we will need to have a certain public information campaign in place to be able to get them interested and then to support their transfer to the Far East. Then we also want to propose a new way of dealing with unemployed for the employment centers or job centers. Today they are mostly focused on paying the unemployment benefits, but they don't have what they lack is a very close contact with potential employers, and they don't have the up-to-date databases on vacancies open in Russia. And we want to start a hotline in the near future to support the people willing to move to the Far East. We also managed to work with the job searching instruments like Avito, Headhunter, and some other browsing instruments, and we see that about 1 million people using those job portals, and we want to update them on the Far Eastern potential. So why do we believe that people will move to the Far East? Because we can ensure that the jobs are mostly in the new enterprises where the job safety standards are the highest, the salaries are higher than average salary levels in Russia, and we believe that the conditions will be quite comfortable for people. We're planning to address housing issues. We already are building some projects for SUEK company, for the people in the Far Eastern vessel building industry. That's where we're building new housing, and we're planning to launch some new mortgage programs there as well. As far as the healthcare is concerned, we are planning to provide people who move to the Far East with all information that they may need to get different public services. So, I mean, we know that we have to address many issues there, but we stand ready to tackle them. And we already mentioned that we developed this electronic reference book on professions and vacancies. I want to now give the floor to Boris Krylovsky, who is a developer and designer and author of that reference book. Thank you, colleagues, and I want to thank the Ministry of the Development of the Far East and Northern Caucasus. I believe that the issue is very, very important, and it's a pilot issue in many ways for the Russian Federation context. And although we have two federal districts present here, what is really interesting about it is how to make sure that those various districts collaborate and how they can really complement each other's efforts, how they can use human development agency resources and the corporation and some other investors in the region, specialized corporations, and we can also enjoy the special attention of the Federal Center to the development of those regions. We know that the situation is really very tough, but the potential is very promising. You know that the economy of the Far East is at least twice as big as the economy of the Northern Caucasus, and the population of the Northern Caucasus exceeds the population of the entire Far East. Unemployment level in the Caucasus is twice as high compared to the Far East, and the income per capita income in the Far East is higher than in the Northern Caucasus. Therefore, while the Northern Caucasus has a very high birth rate, excuse me, Mayor, let me in. Please don't focus on the numbers too much. We'll try to please mind the time. Okay, we've looked at some of the performance indicators for the last 5 years, and we saw that the Northern Federal District had 243,000 more people, while the Far East keeps losing its people. And the Far Eastern people, we see that there is a negative migration in the Far East. By the way, the Northern Caucasus is also experiencing out-migration. So where do people go from those regions? Very interesting. Well, they move mostly to the Central Federal District. About 60,000 people move from the Far East and the Northern Caucasus to the Central District. And there is a smaller number of people moved to the Northern Caucasus from the Far East. we see that people of various professions and vocations move in various ways around the country. So it is very important to run qualitative comparisons to see in some areas we need more people in the Northern Caucasus, while in other areas we need more people in the Far East. And today we have this instrument, this electronic reference book of professions and vocations is a very good instrument. It will help us. It will help people to make knowledgeable decisions on what kind of salary levels they may expect. The average personal income in the Far East is 10,000 rubles, higher than an average in Russia. And we see that the housing area, again, we see that the Far East has about 3 square meters more per capita than in the other areas of Russia. Although, again, within the region itself, the situation may differ quite sharply. In terms of some basic social needs, like preschool education, like kindergartens, we see that the health care availability, we know that, again, the regions differ very much, like in the Far East seems to be more provided with doctors and kindergartens than the Northern Caucasus of Russia. I mean, that really gives you a picture on what kind of things you have to take into account when you try to attract people to particular regions. I want to see another slide. 2 more slides, please. Regardless of what the Ministry of Labor is doing in terms of systematizing the professionals and vocations to the job titles, etc., when some professional standards were introduced for the job descriptions, the Far Eastern Agency for Human Resources Development made another step and wanted to have an updatable system that would look into the priority economic sectors and see at the capacity of every industry individually. And we see the trend. I mean, when we analyze the situation in various sectors, we see what kind of vacations and high demand, and we see how business interests should be taken into account in the education sector. The next slide describes the priority industries. More than 20 sectors were taken into account where there is an understanding of what kind of indicators shall be taken into account when we look at the human resources development. And the next slide shows the indicators that then help you develop the electronic reference book of vacations and professions. The reference book shows you the district itself with average numbers, although average numbers won't give you the entire picture, but it displays a so-called matrix by industries, by sub-regions, and we see that trends may differ, that sometimes the conditions and salaries may vary quite dramatically, and the businesses and potential job seekers may take that into account and see what kind of other things they may expect if they choose a particular area where they want to work, or an industry where they want to work in the future. And in conclusion, I want to say that this electronic reference book should be developed further. These are just the very primary steps, and it's there just for a few days. But what kind of other things should be done in the near future? We need to have an online system or kind of a gateway or a web portal that would help people contact this information, get access to this information, and share it with some other areas. We want it to become an instrument to make everything very transparent. First with the Far Eastern district, and then we may start doing that for some other districts of Russia. We want to have an interactive map of human resources, of labor resources, and all that should be based on this systematic industry diagnostics. The agency should be able to interpret the numbers that they operate with, because we cannot be absolutely sure that those numbers are very well substantiated, and the agency should go into every project and see what kind of work they employ when they work with the job seekers, whether they want to continue employing those numbers of people which they originally planned, because we don't want to confuse the education and training sectors. Then the human development indices for the Far East are now being considered to be introduced into such a reference book to be able to assess the human resources properly. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alexei, for your information. The numbers that you quoted, like 71 doctors per 10,000 people in the Northern Caucasus, well, the coverage is quite high in the Far East, and we need to have more people of various qualifications now. That's why we launched the labor mobility program. I want to give the floor to Mikhail Kirsanov, who is in charge of the Department of Employment of the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. We know that about a year ago, a labor mobility law was approved, and there was a program approved as well that where the employers are being encouraged, to attract more people in the Far East from some other districts of Russia. And I wonder whether this program may work well with the Northern Caucasus as well. You are given 7 minutes for your presentation. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for getting here to discuss this very interesting and important program. Well, as for the labor mobility, some changes were made, amendments were made to the employment law that say that if we have a labor deficit region that wants to employ more people, and we have only 15 regions of this kind in Russia, and 6 of them are regions in the Far East, and some of them got some allocations from the budget in 2015 already, but we continue updating the program, and we got some proposals for 2016, and we will start funding that program. What is the whole substance of that program? If an employer wants to participate in such a program, that employer should go to the employment agency of the relevant region, and usually they're talking about the highly qualified staff that they want to find, and they cannot find them among the unemployed or even in the free labor market of that region, and they want to bring such people from another region. then 150,000 rubles from the federal budget and 75,000 rubles from the regional budget may be allocated per each such worker to the employer. This is a kind of a compensation to compensate the employer for bringing such workers from another region, because they have to pay for the transportation, for the housing, etc. So we were trying to make it as convenient as possible. Certainly, this program, as any other government program, has some negative things. For example, it is not easy to get access to this program, since we're talking about the very stringent controls of the budget funds, and sometimes employers have to wait for several months before the request is approved, and the situation may change over that time. Now we're trying to make this program more flexible. About 2/3 of the potential participants of this program, I'm talking about the workers who were brought to the Far East using this program. I mean, we had about 2,000 people who moved to the Far East, but it's too early to judge about the success.
People have just started coming, and we'll see the results after some months when those people have really come and settled and started working and have started paying money to the pension funds, etc. The volume is not too high either. This year and a half and last year, some volumes were envisaged, but possibly the figures will be reviewed. 2,000 people for the whole district is not much. And at the same time, we get letters asking, why do you not invite us? Why do you attract people from other constituent territories? These are good programs. They make it possible to bring people from other regions to the forest. This is a promising program because it makes it possible for us to find the specialists we need throughout the country. And we think that this program will continue to develop. Will people from the Northern Caucasus come? Well, possibly we do not really track the origin of such migration, but will welcome newcomers from the Northern Caucasus. There are some other essential problems. We have questions to the employment bodies, and we need to make their work more active. It's not always that the employer gives vacancies to the employment agency. Very often the agency sits and waits for the person to come and ask for employment. Will give incentives for them to start working more effectively. When somebody comes looking for a job, that person should get some service, should get registration at the portal, should have some proposals coming, and this will include the graduates of universities, people who feel they may lose their employment, etc. And this helps us form a labor reserve to see what potential workers may be employed in this or that quality. We also need to realize that the structure of the labor market is changing. There's a huge demand for outsourcing work. Should people really move to a different region when the same job may be done as outsourcing? This is a question that needs to be answered. We'll actively develop inter-regional interaction between employment agencies. We're grateful to the ministries of the Northern Caucasus and the Far East that pay big attention to human resources development. We are sure that with the help of the Education Ministry, we jointly will be able to raise the quality of our labor resources and improve interregional interaction. Mobility is the future, but that includes mobility of labor resources and mobility of our work, our ability to educate or retrain people, to search for personnel to provide quality services. These are the main lines of our work and of our plans for the future. When we speak about the flow of people from the Northern Caucasus to the Far East, we see that the unemployment level in both territories is higher than the average for Russia, which means that there are some structural distortions there, and other constituent territories also should be involved in this type of interaction. Thank you, Mikhail Vladimirovich. Surely the program of migration and donors of labor resources, educating human resources is a global project, unprecedented project for Russia, which needs support. My question is to Alexander Klimov. Tell us, please, what programs at the level of the Education Ministry could be targeted at solving the issues of labor migration, and are there any projects supporting the Far East development? I'll focus on general issues and will try in the concluding part of my presentation to give answers to your questions. For the Ministry of Education and Science, there are two key priorities in higher vocational training, that is quality and the practical orientation of our curricula. If we are able to train specialists who may enter the labor market easily and in their professional career reorient themselves from one type of activity to a related one, this will solve many problems of labor migration. If a person can get adjusted in his labor activity, moving from one region to another or within the original region, this will help us solve problems of unemployment and labor demand. We understand that practical education envisages interaction of educational institutions with the industry. There's a big sector of non-formal education too, which is very essential for letting people move freely from one region to another, from one field of activity to another. It's not always that people go to a university to change their qualification or speciality. They may do it just using books, and 37% of the active population involved in economic activity should annually, according to ministerial documents, undergo retraining or additional training to raise their professional status and expertise. And the educational organizations also get to know what they should do from the viewpoint of how many students should be admitted to the university for this or that speciality, and from the viewpoint of the contents of the curricula to meet the requirements of modern economy. Together with the colleagues from the North Caucasian Ministry, we asked ourselves what are the structures of admitting students to universities, and there were a number of surprises. And we think that requests of the regions should be better taken into account, and special attention should be given to analyzing such requests, sometimes those requests are not justified and different solutions should be provided. And we want to thank the Ministry for the good interaction we've established. If there are real economic industrial projects in the region, then there's demand for this or that type of vocational education. Mass media provides some assessments of the requirements, but they are usually not covered by the real capacities. From the viewpoint of the activities of the ministry and the practical orientation of our educational program and better accommodation of the graduates, there are three major lines of our work. First, accounting professional standards. More than 300 specific professional standards have been adopted by now. These need to be taken into account, and educational programs and curricula should also be based on them and learn people to get adjusted and to get involved into the social life and activity of the region, people living in the region. Coordination boards have been set by the ministry. There are 57 new pedagogical and methodological associations which have been also set up, and we hope that by the end of the year we'll be able to finalize the analysis of those standards and their incorporation into the curriculum. Second, the variations of educational program. Two diplomas of an engineer in machine building in fact, may mean absolutely different level of qualification, and in some universities, education is more realistically targeted at the real demand at this or that company or industry, or say be it a major industrial plant or some small business company. And an engineer who needs to work at a small company should have different skills than the engineer at a big industrial enterprise. So joint work with different industrial cooperation is needed, and the federal universities are an example of such powerful entities which may ensure the necessity to meet variable requirements of our different customers, of our different sectors of industry. The results that have been obtained by now are quite positive. The next step is more concentrated resources and a possibility of building up more practice-oriented curricula. I want to draw your attention to Law 500, and we may provide budget-supported educational places to meet the requests of the regions to get specific specialists and launch some programs. In Ingushetia, for example, we discussed with the leader of the republic that such programs should be launched at the university and will support the regions and the universities that are going to launch new programs to meet the requirements of new businesses, new investment projects. And we're going to support not only the Northern Caucasus or the Far East, but other regions as well in that. A very good instrument welcomed by entrepreneurs is the instrument of target-oriented education. This or education targeted at some type of employment on the basis of special contracts for such education, say for the defense sector plants that request specific specialists. Vocational education is all essential for us, not just higher vocational education, but just vocational education as a whole at the level of higher educational institutions and secondary ones. And there are numerous professions specified in this field, and new standards are to be developed and adopted, and other new skills adopted which make it possible to assess the qualification of this or that specialist. In North Alania, together with our colleagues, last year we held a championship, and this was a very positive event for the educational system. It let us establish what this or that person can do, how skilled this person is at working at this another machine tool. And on the other hand, that causes interest on the part of the participants, and we also understand that such competitions will be a driver of development of the quality of vocational training. Thank you. You mentioned the good experience of the North Caucasian Ministry in determining the necessary quotas for university admittance. I want to give the floor to the representative of North Caucasian University. She'll tell us about their interaction with the employers in that sphere. Thank you. I'll not show the presentation. We don't have enough time. I'll just mention the main points. Surely that is really relevant when we say that the share of the young people and the structure of the population in our district is the highest in the country. In the Russian Federation, that is 22.8%. That's the share of young people from 18 to 25. In the North Caucasian Federal District, this is higher, and in Dagestan, this is 29.8, in Chechnya, 29.9, in Ingushetia, 29.8, which is high enough. In my presentation, I showed statistical figures for Russia and for other groups of the young people, starting from 16, and we see that the trends are the same. The structure of the population in the North Caucasian Federal District is such that the young people will show some dominance, and at the same time we see that the lowest part of the young people undergo training at vocational centers of the secondary level, and less young people enter universities. And so the unemployment figures for the young people are really high. The figures for the North Caucasian district are the highest in the Russian Federation. If we compare that with the requests formulated in the state program for the development of our district and compare them to the control figures of acceptance, admittance to the university, we'll see that there's no clear-cut coordination between them. There's no clear understanding of who should be educated and trained for the near future and the far future needs. Yet, in the recent 3 to 4 years, we've been working at that, and the Ministry for the North Caucasian District have joined us in this, effort, and this year more than 60% of the figures for the numbers of students admitted are correlated with the requests of different sectors of economy, including the processing industry, construction, the agricultural sector, etc. I think that in all the districts, universities should follow that line of development. Otherwise, we'll see the situation of preference for lawyers and economists, which we see in most universities, and then these people get unemployed when they graduate, and this cannot be accepted, especially when the people are trained at the expense of the budget. They are ambitious, they want careers, they are educated, but they don't have a possibility of a job, and this negative emotional and not only emotional experience sometimes drives them towards criminal or towards the criminal road. So we need to think about reallocating those people to other regions where they lack labor force. We don't know too well how to do it. I am grateful to you for saying that some systemic, large-scale awareness programs should be promoted for the children to realize from their school age that if they choose this or that type of specialty, they should know that they may move to some regions, and they should know what they may expect from the viewpoint of the wages or prospects of their career and growth. The children and their parents should know that information, and we should have it too. So a possible proposal might be this much: at the forthcoming session of the Club of Federal Rectors at the Urals University, we are going to discuss the model of academic mobility according to the requests of the Forest Federal District, and take those requests in account in the system of our universities. There may be numerous solutions proposed, and the experience of the Soviet times was quite positive, and we know that they trained specialists for Norilsk, for example, and there should be some coordination of programs at that level. I want to propose another approach too. There's a deficit of federal budget means, and at every district in the major universities of the country, there may be set up centers for preferences. At our university, we have set up a center for training specialists for hospitality, business, and recreation, jointly with resort areas in the northern Caucasus, and according with the request of the government, we have educated 186, we have started educating specialists for this sector, and the requirement is assessed at the level of 176,000 specialists. Different professional competencies have been determined, different groups of specialists needed, and we compared that to the standards of education we have, and assessed whether those standards meet the requirements. The universities have the authority to change those standards, introduce some new elements in them. We also studied the experience of 5 universities and the 5 top in the world, 2 in Switzerland, 1 in the Netherlands, 1 in Great Britain, and 1 in Spain. We sent our specialists there, faculty members there, to study the educational process, and we chose 23 persons whom we sent for 2-year training to those universities, and we've adjusted our curricula, developed new curricula, signed contracts with Lyon, Lucerne, and another university. Lucerne and The Hague, a 3-side agreement stating that they, together with us, will participate in the program of retraining for the faculty of our Russian universities that work in these areas of training. Our costs have come close to 40 million rubles to create all the prerequisites for that, and we want to concentrate our efforts and give possibilities for other university to undergo that retraining, to raise new specialists or reorient their specialists in the regions to be able to educate the people really needed in the regions. We are not quite sure that there will be huge enthusiasm among school children coming to those specialities. 30 vocational secondary institutions were included into the system, and a certain cluster has been set up. But the mentality needs to be taken into account. In the Northern Caucasus, the mentality is that parents prefer their boys to work as servicemen, as policemen, or be dentists, but not work in the hospitality business. So we need to do something to make the population look at this sector differently, with greater esteem. When we started this work in 2012, we had 1 budget place at the university for that specialty. Now we have more than 300 of them, and commercial educational places are requested in those sectors now too. So I think that such priorities, programs can be developed in different regions. Thank you. Centers for regional preferences, you mentioned. Does that mean that we need to come to an agreement that if we deal with the hospitality business, if you deal with that in your region, the Far East universities should not duplicate that work and just use your possibilities? Right, you are, and we might choose their preferences and invite specialists they specifically train. My question is to Tatiana Leonova, Vice Rector of the Far East University. Are you ready for such a type of interaction? There are experts in the Far East and in the Northern Caucasus. Well, if we take the Far East, oil processing never was viewed as a key sector. Now you start developing it. Will you use the competencies of other universities, say from the Northern Caucasus, or will you develop it from anew in your district? Well, there is interaction between the federal universities that allows us to do this. We are ready to welcome students from other universities for a semester or a couple of semesters for them to see whether they like this specialty and will like to work in this field. Talking about the attractiveness of the Far East, there are numerous problems related with the education and the need for university graduates. And we need investment in the economy alongside with that. The investment has grown significantly, but this is twice as low as in the central federal district, and most probably the graduates will go to the central federal district rather than the Far East. If there are good programs and good projects, students will come. This year, students from 56 regions of Russia came to our university, and more than 56% of them come from beyond the Forest District, and this shows interest in our educational programs. There's a special program to compensate for the air tickets for those students who come from other territories, and students come from the Northern Caucasian district too. We see this interest, and it's very essential that people should come, see that it's really interesting, and then tell their neighbors and friends in their native towns that this is worth doing.
Certainly, what is really very important as well is the secondary vocational education or training. We know that if you look at the promising vacancies, you see that most of them are related to the so-called highly qualified workers or people with vocational training, and therefore we want to refocus the branches of our university from providing higher education to providing rather technical training and a very high qualified training education. And we think that it's important for us that there will be so-called targets that the schools have to meet, and people who will go to those schools should have some surety that the jobs would be provided, that they will be placed into jobs. And we know that today we train more people than our market really needs in some professions. But as soon as the enterprises understand that the social responsibility of a business is not just to provide for the training of school graduates, but to ensure that they will be employed eventually, then certainly such vacations will enjoy higher popularity. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is that a university should also employ the system from the past, the so-called construction campaigns, when students can spend their summer vacations in construction projects. We know that some people go to the space Port Vostochny, and that's where our students may spend their summer vacations, and people from other regions of Russia may come there, and who knows, maybe they will be enchanted with the region and feel encouraged moving there as soon as they graduate from a school. And we will certainly compete with other universities and schools, and if we see that some other universities may find better employment for their graduates, we will try to learn from the experiences, but we first and foremost should be focused on those professions and vocations that are more employable. And we certainly have remember that the entire South Pacific region is ready to employ our experts as well, and we want them to be highly competitive there as well. Thank you, Tatiana. Today we're talking about the so-called targeted training of people in the tertiary education. That's when people are employed in the corporations or companies that funded or co-funded their training. I want now to talk to the person whose school ensures that their graduates are employed by Rusal and some other major Russian corporation. Okay, dear colleagues, yes, indeed, we have some experience. We built some experience in interacting with our industrial partners who are 1,000 miles away from our school, Norilsk nickel or Namangan and Magadan mining companies and hydro building companies, etc. Let me take the example of Nornickel or Norilsk nickel combine. From 150 to 170 students will get their practical lessons from Norilsk nickel. This is usually during summer vacations, includes summer vacation time when they are employed in the civil construction projects, and certainly we do have some experience on how to finance such projects, how to support each and every student during their practical or hands-on experience when they work in the so-called construction detachment. And we, a group, and Norilsk Nickel helps us finance the transportation, housing, and meals for our students. So we, in a way, Norilsk Nickel is trying to ensure that the students are quite happy with the conditions they live in while getting some practical experience from Norilsk Nickel. And now Norilsk Nickel wants to employ another 800 people from our university during the nearest 2 to 3 years. So we have a first group of our graduates we have 68 people who moved to Norilsk Nickel to be employed there as full-time staff, and we had 27 people getting some practical experience during their school year, and our construction department participates, and their students participate in the Vostochny spaceport construction project, and certainly we want to make sure that our students have access to some social services while working there. And there is another thing, is like a legal security for our students when they are employed in the construction projects outside our region. More than 50% of our students, or graduates rather, are being employed today outside the Northern Caucasus region, and we are very ready to work with the Human Development Agency of the Far East, and we want to be networked with some other higher education institutions in the Far East to make sure that the programs that are going to be implemented in the Far East will be implemented with our assistance. Thank you, Ivanovich. Well, this is quite impressive that 50% plus of your graduates are employed outside the Northern Caucasus region. Well, the topic that we touched upon is how to make the working vacations more popular. We have an expert, Nelly Churasov, here, who will educate us on the development of the working vacations or technical vacations in these two regions. First, I'd like to concur with all other speakers that when we're talking about the human resources and its economy, remember that there are very many players involved here, starting with the schools, like training schools and some other things, including the informal employment that is still quite popular when it comes to the technical professions. Well, the most important thing there is a willingness of a person to work as a technician, as a worker. We very often have no idea how a current technician or worker looks like? Well, the current turner looks very different from what we are accustomed to think about, judging on our experience from 30 years ago. Today, these are people with some programming skills, computer technician skills, and the world has changed quite dramatically, and this continues to change very rapidly. And when we were in the northern Ossetia, we had a meeting there, and we saw how the world skills now is impacting people's choices. Let me quote some numbers. Dmitry Livanov, our minister, used to say that that we have more than 50% of the Russian school graduates who were prepared to choose technical or working vocation. And we should understand that this is very important to continue working there and continue making the vacations more popular. We need to have those world skill championships all the time, and we need to have the finals in various regions. For example, only then the potential students will see what a technical vacation looks like, what it does involve and include. When we're talking about the labor surplus regions like the Northern Caucasus, but if you look at the same time on the World Skill Championship in Kazan, Tatarstan in 2014, you see that most people who participated in the engineering and technical vocations at the national championship level, those were mostly the construction and IT services from the Northern Caucasus, and while the graduates from or school children from the Far East were mostly from the automobile industry and some other heavy industries. And if you want, in other words, you cannot just address the issue mechanically, like trying to bring more people from the Northern Caucasus to the Far East. We should rather think about how we should fine-tune our training systems to make sure that we train the people we need. In addition to the World Skills Championships, we also want to have some other forms of competition. I just wanted to give some examples. In the services sector, in the cooking sector, the Northern Caucasus, that's where our technicians are by far higher quality than on average in Russia, and those can be used as growth points. And those guys who want to move to another region, we should make sure that they really have a competence that is above the average Russian competence. And if we want to have a well-balanced labor market, we should not really bring people who are weaker than the locally available. If we really want to ensure that our growth points encourage growth, we need to bring the best of the best from another region. And the last comment I want to say is that when we made a survey of employees, we saw that the World Skills Championship showed that we need to have the championships not only among the children or school children, but we should also have such championships among the people who are below the age of 28. And all companies from Rosatom to Atomflot and Aeroflot, we see that the best workers of those enterprises, unfortunately, do not demonstrate the best competences and the best qualifications. So, in other words, we need to have a good assessment of the current human resources or staff competences at the point, because, again, we should, our average numbers do not look bad, but if you look at the classical, like welding, turning, you will see that the common worker demonstrates horribly poor performance, and if we want to make sure that they work at they compete at the world level, we should do something about their vocational training. Okay. One, remember that the current workers like argon welders or some other workers should be really the people with best competences. We need, I mean, we should be quite aware of the following. Maybe we should train people where they currently live and then bring them to the Far East ready to work. Look, if we start doing that, I mean, we will contribute to both the Far Eastern economy and the local Northern Caucasus economy if we continue training them locally. Talking about the vocational training, I would like to ask an employers community like from Neftegas company. Since you're working on oil refineries and you're building new oil refineries, so we know that you need some more people practically tomorrow. And now I wonder to what extent you, as an employer, stand ready to provide you input um, to the import of experts from another region to the Far East. Okay. My short answer is yes, but now let me give you just a few words in more detail on about the project that we're currently involved in. And I would also provide more details on the staff needs we have. Sibur company with the gas reprocessing in Blagoveshchensk is now building the biggest natural gas processing enterprise in the city of Svobodny. And we are at a very early stage. The project was launched mid last year. And talking about our staff requirements, the numbers were already provided, like about 20,000 new jobs will be opened, but there are three major groups there to make a detail. First, we need people for the project office, people who will be involved in project management. Today, we have just 250 people employed in project management in Krasnodar, in the south of Russia, where we have our design institute, where all the work on design and engineering is being done. Then some people in Moscow, our head office, and in Blagoveshchensk and Svobodny cities. The number of people in project management will continue growing. We will have about 800 people there at the final stage, and we do not expect more vacancies in Moscow or Krasnodar, but we will have more people in the city of Svobodny and some more people in Blagoveshchensk. Some of those people, some of the people who currently work in Moscow will be encouraged to move to the Far Eastern location. But still, we will have to look for more people in the local market, and we are already searching for such people at the point. We need to have people with very good command of English, and it's very hard to find such people locally. We need to have people with the APC contractors, and again, there are very few people who have some contractor contact experience. But still, we believe that we will be able to find sufficient resources in the Far East to meet our project management staffing needs. We are going to employ some new graduates. We will certainly have to get them retrained, and we will have to get them interned with us. Well, the very first stage there, we will have about 30 people, 30 young professionals employed in the networking planning. That's what we are, or milestone planning. We no, in road mapping. It is very hard to get them moved to the Far East because those are mostly women married with children, but still we know that any movement of personnel from another region would incur more expenses. Okay, the second and probably biggest category of experts we need to employ will be our contractor personnel who will build the enterprise. We're talking about people who are concrete experts, the welders. Welders is probably the weakest point where we see, because there are very high risks that we will be able to find enough highly qualified welders to meet all our needs. We again believe that the highest numbers will be in 2018. It will be about certainly more than 1,000 people, and we again are absolutely sure that we will be short of experts identified locally. So we will have to attract people from other regions. We need to provide for social services, for housing conditions. We are starting building the housing for them. It will be a good quality housing, the mobile housing for these people, to ensure that they would be quite happy with what we provide them with. And the third group will be the Gazprom Blagoveshchensk company. That's the people who will be employed in the natural gas processing plant. As soon as the enterprise starts working at its full capacity in 2025, we will have thousands of people involved there, but we'll have to start hiring them rather soon, because some of those people have to be quite actively involved in the commissioning activities. That means that they will have to work at the pre-commissioning stage. And I don't like this word, auxiliary, but I mean auxiliary staff. This is probably a terrible word, but these are the people who support the chief engineer. These are the people who provide like measurement in measurement instruments and in some or operators of some equipment. Again, we're talking people with high education, or at least with some very high quality vocational training. And we need to work very actively with the local universities, local schools, and Russia is a big country. We should not really be focused on just one region. There are many schools outside the region, and we will have to cooperate with other universities outside the Far East to be able to get sufficient numbers of people with required qualifications and competences. Because we understand it's absolutely unrealistic to expect that we can just identify and bring people from other regions of Russia and with all appropriate qualifications, and it's clear why. So what else I would like to mention in my presentation? First, I want to use this opportunity to thank very sincerely. I'm not currying any favor, but I'm very sincere. I appreciative of the cooperation that we have with the agency. And Valentin Vitalyevich already
spoke about various areas of our cooperation. We want to thank everybody for initiative, for involvement. I mean, I'm talking again about the agency, Human Development Agency. We see that the prospects for this cooperation are quite promising. We have a common understanding of the targets. I want to thank every speaker from the training institutions. I understand that you are trying to look at this problem from the employer's point of view, and you are trying to be very proactive in the implementation of various projects with businesses, with employers, and we certainly will try to benefit from what we heard from you. Thank you for your sharing your thoughts. Thank you for your presentation and for the fact that you are prepared to work in the new region of Russia. By the way, we're talking about how the employers will be able to find more workers for their projects in Amur region. Social adaptation and cultural needs of the people who move to a new region. And I think Alan Agoyev will be a very good person to share with us. He is from the Northern Ossetia Alania Republic. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Let me emphasize the professional or vocational training system and its importance. And we know that from the Peter the Great times, where Russia is quite aware of how important it is to have the very good technicians. Please don't go back into that history too far, because we have only 5 minutes for your presentation. Okay, the significance of the working professions is emphasized by our president, Mr. Putin, because we know that the history of the Northern Ossetia has a long history of training workers from the time when, during the Peter the Great time, the system, the first school was started, and we wanted to have these highly qualified workers to serve the needs of the industry, railway sector, etc. Even during the Second World War, we continued training workers for our industry. More than 4,000 people were trained during those years, and after the war, a whole suite of industries were set up in our republic, from electronics to heavy industry plants, and all of them benefited from our system of professional and vocational training, and 16,000 people were trained annually through our system of vocational training system, and these experts worked everywhere, from the Far East to Siberia, Khabarovsk, Komsomolsk-on-Amur, etc. Okay, excuse me. Please, let's just leave the history aside. We are very short of time. Please tell me about what we're doing now. We have some unique history on and experience in training people from Vietnam and some other foreign citizens. But now we have about 13 schools and 7 vocational schools, and we train people, and we even have the World Skills Regional Center in our republic. People are trained in 58 specialties and 45 vocations, and we know that we have to train people in the 50 most demanded in professions or vocations, and more than 80% of our schools, training schools, train people in those high professions and vocations in high demand. We continue developing the infrastructure, having enough assets in our schools and technical colleges. More than 240 million rubles were allocated for our vocational training sector. We were people for agriculture and tourism. We certainly participate in the World Skills Russia and initiative, and from 2013 we participate in the championships of the world skills. The very first open championship was held in 2014, where in addition to the Russian Federation, we had people from Finland and some other countries, and we had then the district professional and vocational masterships in our republic. I want to thank the Agency for Strategic Initiatives for their active involvement and the management of the World Skills Russia. And we are talking about the following: that implementation of we had a qualified examination for cook and welder and auto mechanic, where we use the world skills targets, performance targets, and we were able to approximate our requirements and competences descriptions to the world skills understanding. It's the most realistic procedure for certification of our schools to have the highest quality standards.
Surely the experience accumulated in the sphere of training specialists makes it possible for us to say that upgrading vocational education will help us solve the problems and needs of educating and training personnel for the industry. World Skills Championship in the Far East region will take place in April, and so this is a challenge for us too. There's another issue that we need to mention. There's the quality of information about the possibilities existing. Dmitry Zagoev from the Public Fund Supporting Education will tell us what we can do to inform the employees about the possibilities in the Far East and to calm down their apprehensions. Thank you for the possibility to speak. Possibly I will disillusion you. I have worked with school children for more than 30 years, and I want to draw your attention to a number of problems discussed here. Possibly some new approach is needed. The problems that you mentioned existed 20 years ago too. Social tenseness in the Caucasus region, underpopulation of the Far East. These problems will exist for the coming 20 years, surely. Lev Vladimirovich asked us to talk not just about migration, but about general problems too. I'll do that. Our colleague from the Labor Ministry said that mobility is the future. Let's agree to that. But we should advocate that among school children and the young people. In the Northern Caucasus, very little is done for that. As I said, I've worked there for more than 30 years with school children. This is a hobby I have. And if we ask what the school children get to know in their everyday life, I asked schoolmasters about the promotion materials they place on the corridors, etc. None. In the classrooms, there are materials, posters on the specific scientific or technological things. But as for the cultural or ethical values, nothing is present about that, and we need to start educating the children in the light of those values from the very start. The secondary school educates a citizen, and we need to teach that person behave adequately, get adapted to possible problems. High school develops specialists for the middle class, and we need to pay specific attention to that too. Social advertising is needed. We can imagine that in cities or some countryside we'll see slogans with sentences pronounced by some outstanding individuals. In the 21st century, an illiterate person is not the one who doesn't know how to read or write, but the person who doesn't know how to enrich his or her educational basis. The military teach students the tactics, the strategy, and the local tasks fulfillment. We need to have our own tasks structured in the same way. For example, 2017 may be declared the Year of Knowledge in the Northern Caucasus. For example, we know that wrestling and athletics is very popular in this region. I'm proud of the champions, but in the 21st century, we need to make an emphasis on knowledge, and this should be done. The second idea is that when we say that some university is really outstanding, and I worked at 2 universities and want to draw your attention to the following. An outstanding university is usually outstanding due to some of its departments. The North Caucasian University is present here. They said that many specialists were prepared for Norilsk, and that university had 2 strong departments, the metallurgical one and the technical one. They worked for Norilsk, and they created the fame of the university. Thank you. Before we move on to the wording of the resolution, I'd like to ask the audience, do you have any questions? Be brief and not more than 3 questions. A brief remark first. I want to be critical of everybody, including the moderator. In 2 hours and 45 minutes of the round table, business got only 10 minutes, and businesses, the customer. Still, our round table was in the interests of the consumers. The education ministry now, you provide education to people, nice, and we give them a profession at our workplace. And the tendency that you mentioned, that is diversification of specialists in different directions, that's great. but we ourselves work out educational and training programs to adjust specialists on the workplace. When they come with a different basis in education, that makes our task very hard. What we need is a standard of education. A specialist in mechanical engineering should have the same basic knowledge, whatever the university is, and then we'll make that person adjust, or let that person adjust. Next. I have a question to Tatiana Nikolaevna. I think that the greatest problem is that we need shift education closer to the places of consumption. People from Divnogorsk who come to Vladivostok to study, do many of them come back? Less than 5%. And you say that you want to shift the branches to a lower level. I think that the opposite is needed, and I request the Education Ministry to think about that. We have licenses tied with the building. It's very difficult to set a branch of a university somewhere. Maybe a business project started, and the branch of the university might be needed there and then, but that is a huge problem. Something should be done with that. My proposal is that there should be cooperation between universities, and the problem is that we need specific professions, for example, petrochemist engineers. I already came into contact with the university, the Forest University, and we agreed that teachers from universities would come for 3 to 4 month training periods. They will not go to the forest forever. They are accustomed to their place of living, but they may come for 3 months to give a course of lectures, to give a training course, and they will provide very good educational standards to the students. This mechanism should be organized by the ministry, the universities, and we industrialists will find it very difficult to do it. We need the support of the ministry. I really worry about the situation with the branches. I myself studied at such a branch, and I remember that a special branch was set up from the Moscow University for a city of chemists that taught us applied chemistry, and nobody left that city. There's another problem which I don't know how to solve. For example, I want to train young, clever people somewhere. But the problem is that the school children graduate when they are under 18. I cannot conclude a contract with them that will state that if I pay for the studies of that person in Moscow, he'll have to work at my plant for 5 years. That's the least. Signing a contract with the parents is legally doubtful. The parents cannot just take command of the life of the child after 18, and that may ruin our agreements. And that's the problem of employers. We are ready to send children somewhere to study, but we cannot do it. We cannot pay for it because we have no sound legal grounds for that. And my final question. Earlier, there were 3 lines of education: higher, secondary, and secondary vocational training. I mean education for us employers, secondary vocational college, higher education in technical specialities, etc., and just the secondary school. So the technical college, that's the secondary level, the lower secondary level of the so-called PTU, and the university level. There are consumers for all graduates from all levels. There are niches for that. But the education of the technical college and the technical school, well, they have merged. And that poses a great problem. Practically, we only have colleges, and we as employers do not know what that is. Is that really a college level or a technical school level, which was a lower grade level? This is a problem for us as employers. In case of higher education, I see some realistic movement, and there's a shift from the technical and engineering point of view. People start getting this type of education with a view of work in this line of profession. But as for the technical colleges, there's a lot of problems there. Well, I think that your proposals may be included in the resolution. I want to answer. The branches that work with companies, with industrial plants, for example, in Большой Каменка, well, they will stay there and provide vocational education. All depends on the employer. If the employers are ready to start branches there, that will be done. As for the visiting professors, there are visiting professor programs at the university level. This is a functioning, operating program, and you may profit by it if you work with a university. Thank you. The next question. The International Botany Foundation, Vladimir Botanchuk. I have a question to Sergei Valerьевич. The Ministry for Far East Development in the year and a half have made a breakthrough in many sectors: the coal mining, the construction sector, agriculture, the tourist cluster. My question is related to tourism. Does the ministry interact with the native peoples of the north? How do they use the human resources there? Aborigine tourism can become a frontline tourist activity in the Far East. And the other question is related to the North Sea route. We know that this is an economically essential transport corridor between the Asian Pacific region and other regions of the European Union, other countries of the European Union. What do you do to attract investment and the human capital, upgrade the North Sea route? The second question is not related to our roundtable. The ministry, by June 2016, will prepare the financial and economic model for the development of the North Sea route, which will be a program of development for the route as a global competitor. As for the tourist line of development and the use of unique specificities of the northern territories and northern peoples, surely this may and will be used. For example, in Kamchatka, we have set up tourist specialization for the advanced development territory, and one of the lines of development is ethnic and ethnographic tourism, which will use the possibilities and points of attraction of the local peoples, the aboriginal people. Next question, please, within the topics of our discussion. I do not hear, the microphone is not used. The microphone is not used. I represent Telecom Soyuz Foundation, and supplementary corporate pensions do work for attracting human resources to far-off regions. So we propose to state in the resolution that our employers need additional incentives for such corporate pension schemes. The Labor Ministry today is working with a draft law on pension schemes and non-public pension schemes, and preferences should be given to employers in the territories and related to the specialities where the state needs full-fledged migration policy, and there should be conditions ensuring proper remuneration for people working in those territories. The law on non-public pension provision is being worked at now, and we may include that into our resolution. I do not hear the question. The microphone is not used.
Затрагивали тему повышения качества и престижа вузов Северного Кавказа, в частности Чеченской Республики. Вот в связи с этим создание такого стартап-кластера на Северном Кавказе, потому что молодежь не верит в свое будущее.
I do not hear.
Онлайн-финансовое образование. Мы проводим курсы по финансовому моделированию в Excel. Например, ПЛАТА в Яндексе 251 запрос только в месяц дает 90 тысяч человек.
А вы позвоните Вере, сейчас, может быть.
Я приглашаю руководителей офиса Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, вице-президентов этих банков. И когда молодежь слышит, что они получат зарплату там сразу 350 тысяч рублей, 400 тысяч рублей, если они будут хорошо учиться, это очень сильная мотивация. А как вы смотрите на это, вот, улучшение финансовой грамотности, социальных стартапов, бизнес?
My brief answer is in a positive way. So join us in this effort, starting from the school children and joining our colleagues from the higher educational institutions. And well, if you bring your resource, we'll be grateful. And the very final question. This year, I graduated from a university. A new graduate. I started practice in the 4th year, then I started working. No, I don't hear. He doesn't use the microphone.
Когда они проработали определенное количество времени, они имеют раз, по-моему, в 7 или в 5 лет на год с сохранением заработной платы пройти обучение, образование. И вопрос такой, имеется ли у нас в России такая возможность, планируется это делать, понятно, что какое-то время. Я бы с удовольствием, например, съездил бы на год с сохранением заработной платы на Дальний Восток, с удовольствием получил бы образование, открыл бы для себя что-то новое. Спасибо.
У нас есть программа.
We do have a program, and according to the law, the employer is responsible for supplementary vocational training. If you work well, will produce incomes for the company, and they will let you go for training for some time. There's a paradox. We have the global education program by presidential decree. About 700 people should be sent for training at the expense of the federal budget sent abroad. And in 3 years, we've just found 120 applicants. Nobody wants to go for master programs abroad. And I have to just threaten the rectors of universities that they will be penalized for not sending students. This is not a point of selection. This is the impression that we don't need really trained people. There's no demand for them from the companies. So my comment is unpleasant too. If nobody sends anybody for training, that means that you don't need such specialists. So I wait for your proposals, representatives of the major companies and entities in the regions. When we shift from non-sending to sending people for training, then we'll make it. This will also be entered in our resolution. I do not hear the question.
Можно погромче?
И полностью оголила.
Agriculture might lose people. This happens in Buryatia, for example. We should write it in the resolution that there should be a balance between the specific labor markets. The intersectoral balance should be sustained. Now, let's start discussing the resolution of our roundtable. First, present to the government of the Russian Federation our proposals on the formation of mechanisms to use the HR resources from the Northern Caucasian, to work out the roadmap for developing the HR resources of the North Caucasian district to ensure labor mobility in the Russian Federation, primarily for the Far East district, with account of the priorities of economic development. Recommend to the Agency on HR Development in the Far East to set up in the territory of the North Caucasian district a branch to use the potential of this district to ensure the interaction of educational entities of the Northern Caucasus and the forest in building up joint curricula. And a number of points related with the proposals of Taras Semyonovich. And finally, point 6.
Стимулирование, в частности, негосударственных пенсионных программ для привлечения работников на предприятии Дальнего Востока. И последний пункт, это есть предложение включить, разработать мероприятия по продвижению программы глобального образования.
Не надо мероприятия, надо просто направлять. Не надо этих планов мероприятий, от них толк не очень большой.
Проекты резолюции вышли в ближайшее время, и буду благодарен за ваши комментарии и дополнения. Уважаемые коллеги, уважаемый...
Простите, один вопрос. Да. Глеб Ермаков, вице-президент по персоналу Полюзолта. А кто исполнитель по всему этому?
Соответственно, в резолюции, в протоколе мы предложим исполнителей. Да,
может быть, сейчас озвучите?
Я думаю, что у нас будут исполнители по разным направлениям. Это, прежде всего, будет Министерство по делам Северного Кавказа, Министерство образования, Минтруд, Министерство по развитию Дальнего Востока, Агентство по развитию человеческого капитала на Дальнем Востоке. И также будут вузы по перечню, которые упоминались. Спасибо. Уважаемые коллеги, уважаемый Лев Владимирович, уважаемый Сергей Валерьевич, уважаемые докладчики, эксперты и участники нашего круглого стола, хочу поблагодарить вас за плодотворную работу в рамках нашего круглого стола, те вопросы, которые были, и доклады. В ближайшее время подготовленный подготовленную резолюцию, соответственно, вышлем всем заинтересованным участникам. Спасибо, всем удачи, до свидания.